Kabul Haraf, how are you?
Good evening, everybody. Baruch Hashem. Thank you very much. How are you? Everybody's doing well?
Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. Very nice. How are you, Yitzchak?
Baruch Hashem. Thank you, Rabbi. How are you?
Doing better?
Well medicated.
You look a little bit under the weather. We'll pray for you. We'll pray for you. It's okay. You'll be all right.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay. God bless. All right. So let's start started right away. Doing Bet Yosef. Bet. So so it says in Bet Yosef like this. 1 second. Yeah, okay. So it says Garcina Gemara, right? We have a Gemara. It says there, same place, Menachot. Ba'e Rav Asher Alime velo mi'anve. De'e havu kitine mi'anve. Mai. So Rav Ashi asked a question, and we have to understand what this question means, right? So it's saying it that Amar leRacha. So Rabacha answers him, Kol shekem de minkar mitzvatayu. All the more so the mitzvah is recognizable. Pirash Rashi explains alima. So now he explains these words, right? What they mean. So alime means avim, right? That means it's thick, right? So what does that mean? I guess it means to say that the strings are thick, right? Okay, and then he says the ehavu ketine, because if it was small, if it was zakim, so Rashi explains what does it mean ketine? It means if it was thinner ones, right? Havu mi'anve, so then they would do loops. She'arukim hem, they're going to be longer. They're going to be long. Kokach aval mipne ketine aval mipne oviam, because of their thickness, havu kashim le'anov. So because of that, it's difficult to loop them. Kol sheken de ksherim, all the more so they're kosher. The hoil ve'ilu hayu dakim hayu ksherim. So it says all the more so they're kosher. Why? Because if they were thin, they would be kosher. The ha'arukim hen, because they're long. They're long enough to make a loop. Kol sheken keshem avim, all the more so when they're thick. The minkra mitzvatam tfei. So then their mitzvah is more recognizable. What does that mean? You see them better. They're more visible. They're more visible. So, okay, let's go on a little bit. Let's see what he, right? The Kataba Itur. So says the Itur regarding this. Shema Mina, you learn from this whole passage in the Gemara. Look what he says, something very important, right? That even if you have just enough length left over, after it got cut, right? That you could loop 8 hairs, fulot, right, which are folded over. So what does that mean? It's kosher, he says, kasher. So you know what that means? That tells you that what we do is we imagine as if these strings were actually thin like hairs. Would you be able to make a loop if it was thin like a hair? Right? So if that's the case, even though now it's thick, nevertheless still kosher. That's the chidush. That's the novel idea over here. Kasher. Ad kan leshano. That's the end of the language. So says Maran, Bet Yosef, it seems to me, the alime, the katine, that if that's the case, right, that they're thick like this, you know, and serot kifulot, be'erech shar tzitziot shenohagim la'olam. In other words, they're pretty much the same as the other tzitzit which are made in the world, right? Just like a custom, whatever. Kamar, but he said, we don't go that far to say we're going to do like, measure with hairs, because nobody makes tzitzit like that, says Maran. You know, nobody makes tzitzit with hairs. So therefore, the proper way to measure it is not with hairs, but with like the average tzitzit that you have in the market. You know, which is like, in other words, the average stuff. So because that's the most commonly used tzitzit. So therefore, we should measure with that, not with hairs, because nobody makes tzitzit with hairs. Okay, so it's a little bit machloket there between these two rabbis. So it says Rosh Katav. 1 second. Yeah. Right. Rosh Katav says the Rosh Bayazo. He also wrote this Gemara, this question in the Gemara, the Psakav and his Psakim. Begam Rabbeinu Yerucham. Also Rabbeinu Yerucham. The Katav Din Ze Aval. He also wrote this din. Aval Rif Rambam, but he says the Rif and the Rambam Hishmitu. They didn't write this din at all. They left it out. By the way, in this kind of learning, that we're doing, leaving something out is just as much as a lesson as putting something in. In other words, leaving something out has a lot of meaning in our lessons. You know what I mean? In the way we learn. So it means something that they left it out. So it says Rabbeinu nimshach acharayhem. So it says Rabbeinu, the Tur is going after their shita. So meaning what? That the Tur also left it out. The Tur didn't bring this halacha. So therefore, what happened was that the Bet Yosef brought it by himself. Because in the Tur, we didn't see this. Okay. Rabbeinu Agadol Maria Avuhav. So it says the Maria Avuhav, Katab, he writes that Ulai Mishum De'ate B'Mekol Sheken. Maybe the reason is because it's like all the more so. What does that mean? Lo Chashash Li'avio. That's why he didn't bring this halacha. In other words, it's already learned as all the more so than all the other stuff that we already learned before. Katav she'ulai mishum de'atem mikol shegan. Aval ze dochak. But it says Maran, this is not really, it doesn't sound right. It's forced. This kind of logic. Sharei HaRosh mevi oto, because the Rosh brings it. V'gam ha'Itur, and also the Itur, v'Adam v'Chava, and also this book Adam v'Chava. Ad Kaneshano. Right? So he's telling you, right, that it doesn't sound right, this kind of a svara, this kind of reasoning. So what does that mean? Leaving it out, we still have to understand, right? What does that mean here? So it's nevertheless it's difficult. That the Talmud pshitale, that even though the Talmud, it's simple for the Talmud. In other words, it considers it to be simple logic. The Mikomakom, in other words, the Talmud solves the problem, the question with ease, no issues there. Anan lo adifinan merav Ashe, but he says we're not better than Rav Ashe from the Talmud. That he asks this question. So in other words, there is a question there. If so, he says Havale lekotvo. So then, right, the Tur should have written this. Why didn't he write this halacha? In order that we shouldn't ask, just take the way Rav Ashe asks. באפשר שישמיתו משום דלה בקינה בשורה. So he says that maybe the reason why he left out this halacha, that he doesn't really know what it means, the obi b'dakot. He doesn't know what it means to be thick. He doesn't know what it means to be thin. In other words, it says in the Gemara, thick and thin. But okay, what does that mean though? Like how much? Like what's the diameter? What's the radius? Whatever, right? What are you talking about? The alternative, but it says Maran, it seems more reasonable, more logical to say the lo b'kinan b'shiura de'ovi b'dakot. So he says we're not really we don't really I'm sorry. Lomar sheishmitu mishum datem kol sheken. It seems more reasonable to say that he left it out because it comes as all the more so, right? It's obvious. K'divrei Rabbeinu Agadol, like Rabbeinu Agadol, Maria Avuhav. And even though in the beginning he had this question, once he saw that it comes from all the more so argument, he accepted it, the answer. So he says, since that according to so since this is like everybody agrees to this halakha, nobody argues with this. The mikol sheken, because it's all the more so. Lo chashu lechatvo. Therefore, he didn't. That's why he didn't bother to write it. In order to exclude from your thought, right? To exclude that you shouldn't think like Rav Ashi asked this question. Meikara. Ve'arosh ve'Rabbeinu Yerucham chashu. So he says, but the Rosh and Rabbeinu Yerucham, that they wrote this halacha, they were concerned, they had concern like this. What does that mean? That you also may ask this question and not know how to answer. Just like Rav Ashi. So therefore they wrote it. So in other words, it comes out that conclusion of Maran seems to be that the truth is that this halakha is necessary. In other words, there is a reason to write it. Just a matter of, some thought that it wasn't necessary to write it. Some thought it was necessary, but it's true halakha, that's for sure, right? It is halakha. Okay, very good. So that's the end of the Bet Yosef. We're going to go to Shulchan Aruch. Okay.
Rabbi, by the way, the books are they're in the main hall.
I see. Where though? Where?
Elo put them where the books are.
I see. I spoke to him this morning. I told him. He said there. I told him I hope you didn't throw them out, and he said no, it's we didn't throw it out. He said.
Yeah. I saw him today. I asked him.
Okay. Chazak Baruch. Thank you for that. Thank you. Now Benny can sleep easy. He paid $300 for those books. God bless his soul. Okay. Did you notice that Benny's not around recently?
Oh, he's usually not around. He's in Miami.
Right, exactly. He's over there. Interesting. He's probably moving there.
No.
When a person spends so much time in one place, that shows that he kind of likes it, if you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of people are going that way.
A lot of people move.
Bruria, they're all coming to see you, Bruria.
To Miami? Where?
Yeah, they're all coming to Florida. Everybody wants to come to you.
Oh, well, maybe we can trade spots here. I can, I can go over there and they can come over here,
Oh my God. Oh my God. Wow. Okay. Anyway, let's get back to our discussion here. That's funny. Okay. Shulchan Aruch. Okay, so we're doing now that Shulchan Aruch. Okay. So it says like this, right? So it says that which we say that if it got cut off, we say you have to have a loop, at least a loop there. But you know what it is? Sometimes the strings are thick, right? As we said. By the way, today, most of the strings are pretty thick. If you notice that. And the reason why they make it like that is because they last longer. They're tougher, Usually the thick ones last much longer. The thin ones are like flimsy, kind of. Whatever. So most people prefer the thick ones. Also, they make more money. It's more expensive, So it's good for business as well. But anyway, right? So it says, but it says So the truth is like this, right? He says that even though they're thick, but even if they were thin, and there was enough there to make a loop, kasher, it will be kosher. So says Rama, as we said in Bet Yosef, right? It brings that. So it says we go according to the average ones that are on the market, So if the average is going to be good, even though yours are very thick, we go according to the average anyway. So if you have enough for the average, that's good enough. By the way, there is logic to this, to this whole thing, that we go according to the average. Why is that? Because the whole thing is, that why do we want such a length like this to make a loop? The whole point is that we want to be able to see that, it's significant enough to notice it, that it's there, So when it comes to that, it doesn't really matter whether it's thick or thin. If it has the same length, you're going to notice it anyway. So therefore, that it makes sense, this halakha. There's a logic to it. Okay, whatever. That's the Shulchan Aruch bet. Now we're gonna go to Gimel in the Bet Yosef. So it says like this in Gimel Bet Yosef. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nהיה בדברו. So it says, Umash katav Rabbeinu, that which Rabbeinu said, the Tur, Rashi and Piresh and Rashi explained, the Ba'inan Kedei Aniva, that we need enough to make a loop, min ha'anaf, that has to be from the corner, according to Rashi. The Ri Piresh, but Ri says not like that. Even if it got totally cut, the whole corner, right? Beresh. Oh, right. So he's more lenient. It's over there. This machloket, this argument. Also, Lamed Chet Amud Bet and Menachot. Aha de'aminan. Regarding that which we said, V'kama shiur gardomim. So that's over there. How much can be left over, right? To be kosher. Kedei le'anvan. So he says, right, that it has to be enough to make a loop. Katvot Tosfot. Says Tosfot. Mitoch perush hakontras. So he says from the Perush, the explanation, the commentary of the Rashi, the Besamuch that we saw, Gabe Ha de Muchach Rava, Tzarich Nikshor Al Kol Chulya V'Chulya. So that which Rava proved that you have to tie on each winding needs also knots. The Esal Kadatech Lo Tzarich, you can think that it doesn't need it. Ha de Amre Bnei Rabbi Chia, that which the sons of Rabbi Chia said, Gardum et Chelet Kisharim, that the leftovers of Chelet are kosher. There's a loop there. Kimon de Ishtare le Ilae, Ishtare le Kule. So if that's the case, since the upper ones are still left, so therefore the whole thing is left. Piresh let le Ha de Amaran. So he explains that he doesn't hold that which we said le'el above kadesh shiur aniba, that we need a loop. Mashma de svirei, so it's implied that he holds the aniba chutz lekesher acharon. That loop is talking about besides the last knot, which is in the tzitzit. Veitachen yoter. So it says it's more probable lefaresh to explain the shiur aniva samuch lekanaf kamar. Then when it says, right, the size of the loop, it's talking about right next to the kanaf, the corner. So it says now he's not really arguing about what we said above. That's what's also implied from Sifri, the Midrash, the Parashat Gedilim over there. It says over there, and what are we talking about? We're talking about the beginning. But it says when it comes to the end, then gardomim, right, these leftovers can be even a little bit, something small, minute. Mashma de gedilim kai. So it implies it's talking about the gedilim, right, the strings. The gamma rosh. So this is also the rosh katab al hadiamar, that which said Diamar Rava said in the Gemara. Shma mina, you learn from here. You have to do knots on each winding, as we said. Mashma. So here, from here, it implies a little bit. That what you said, you have to have loops in order for loop. Doesn't mean that you have to have enough to do a loop with the petil, with the strings. It means to say that even though the whole string was cut, and then was left over with the knots, you have there enough. Since it says the Kimon de Ishtare, since it was permitted, Ilae, the upper ones left over, Ishtaru Kulhu, then it's all left over. So you see from there that if it was left over enough for a loop in the strings, lo mishtare akesher, the kesher, the knots don't get permitted by that. Rashi dachak But Rashi was, he was vehement here, pushed a little bit to explain the Rava he doesn't hold that you need enough for a loop. Below mashma ken, so it says, but it's not really implied like that. The chen besifri tane, and also it says in Sifri in the Midrash, tane beparashat Gedolim. He teaches in the parsha of Gedolim of the strings, whatever. But medvarim amrim, when was that said? Betchilata, in the beginning. But b'shirea, when it comes to leftovers, in other words, if it got cut, b'gadumia, kol shehu, even a little bit. Mashma the Gedolim kai. So it implies that it's talking about the strings, the knots. I'm sorry. V'lo yadati lama lo katav Rabbeinu. So I don't know why Rabbeinu didn't write Sharosh Yiskim the Diberi, that Rosh agrees with me. But Samag Rabbeinu Yerucham, and these two rabbis Katvu Kedivir Tosfot Verosh, they don't like Tosfot Rosh. Shafilu lo nishar kadei aniva ela miagdil kasher. That even if you have enough to make a loop from the knots, it's kosher. Right? By the way, that's not the way we do it, practically speaking. We go like the other shita. The Samak Katav. So says the Samak, Shete Asarot, he wrote both the opinions here. But he didn't paskin which one is the halacha. The Mordechai Katav. It says the Mordechai, Techila Leachriya. First he said to paskin, Shebenishar Kadeh Aniva Miagdil Kasher. Even if you have enough from the knots, it's kosher. And then afterwards he wrote, the Shem Rabbeinu Shimshon. Name Rabbeinu Shimshon, lidchot otam rayot, to push out those proofs. Ve'ela, so then he concludes like this in the end. He says, "Ve'en koach be'adi le'achshir." I really don't have the power to be machshir to say it's kosher. Ad yavo more tzedek, until comes more tzedek, right? So what does that mean? Eliyahu Navi comes and paskins, right? Whatever. Ad kanashano. That's the end of that. So now, right? What does Maran say? Look what he says, right? Minhag olam kedivei Rashi. So he says that minhag is like Rashi. Very important to know that, right? So what does that mean? That when we measure the string which is left over after it got cut, we're talking about up to the knot, right? Because above that, that's not considered to be a part of the strings. It's a part of the knots. Two different sections, So therefore we do like Rashi, right? Which means that we measure according to how much is left over from the strings only, not from the knots. But it says, if it's not possible, look what it says, incredible, right? If it's not possible to do like Rashi, let's say you have a dire situation, right? For instance, let's say you're in a place, right, where there's no tzitzit there. Let's say you're in Thailand, right? Right? And you can't buy tzitzit in Thailand. You don't know where to go. There may be some places over there you can buy, some Judaica stores. You never know, right? Right? שאין ציציות מצויים לתקן כדאי המראי והראש לסמוך עליהם. Look what it says, incredible, right? It says that if you don't have a place to buy tzitzit, then rely on the Ri and the Rosh, right? They're big enough, they got big shoulders, these guys, you know what I mean? So rely on them, if in an emergency case. Right? לסמוך עליהם, בעוד שיש לדבריהם ראיה. So it says also they have proofs for their words, so it's not like, they just made up from the sky, Right? They brought it down from the heavens. No, there's proofs for that. So therefore, right, the rule is that we go like them when there's no choice. That's what it says. Where's the proof come from? From Sifri, right? The Midrash, the Sugya, the Gemara, also the Gemara. It says, "Atya Shapir L'Shitatam." You can also learn it like their opinion. So therefore, the rule is, right. Bottom line is that we, in an emergency case, when you have no choice, you can rely on the Ri and the Rosh. So again, right, I'm repeating, what does that mean? That means that even though the string got cut off totally, there's nothing left except the knots. You can consider the knots to be right, a part of it. So therefore, we can be lenient, right? That's a big chidush. Okay, whatever. But lechatchila, if you have a choice, right, you can go to Main Street, right, and buy some, at your local Judaica store, right, and buy some tzitzit or order it online or whatever, God knows what, right? Whatever, right? Online you can order it. So then what you should do is, get a new pair or get some tzitzit. Right? And whatever. Okay, that's the idea. Very good. Let's go to Shulchan Aruch and see. And we're done with the Siman. The Siman was relatively short and easier than what we're used to already.
Yeah, the previous was a monster, Rabbi.
We had two monsters, yeah. Okay, so right, it says Kedei Aniva Rashi. So it says Shulchan Aruch that when we say right leftover as a loop, according to Rashi, what does that mean? Min ha'anaf. It means from the strings. That's where you start measuring. But according to Ri, he says afilu nechtach kol anaf. Even if all the got cut off strings, there's only shak Kedei Aniva. There's nothing left over there for loops. Ela mina gadil. Just there's knots. That's all you have. Kasher, right? It's kosher, right? Uminhag ha'olam. So it says the minhag is like Rashi. But when if it's not possible, yesh lismoch al Ri. Then we rely on Ri. We also said, right? The Rosh agrees with him. So yeah, that's pretty much the story. Any questions on that, Yitzchak?
Oh, all clear, Rabbi.
Okay, good. Okay, very good.
Good to have another opinion to rely on.
Any questions, ladies? Okay, no questions.
We're okay. We're
Yeah,
okay.
you guys, everybody's so smart. There's no questions. Okay.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Okay. So that's the end of that. We'll finish the Siman. Okay. Now we're going to next Siman, which is Yud Gimel, right? Okay. All right. I have to pull it up. 1 second. Give me a second here. Yud Gimel has 3 halachot. Okay. Okay, I just pulled up the Shulchan Aruch. Now I pull up the Torah. Okay. So it says the Torah like this. It seems like it's pretty short. Yeah, very short. It's like 4 lines, the whole Torah. So it says, Arba tzitziot me'akrin zeh et zeh. So it says 4 tzitziot, they do hold back one another. So what does that mean? Each corner, right? You have tzitzit on each corner. If you're missing one, that means the whole mitzvah is lost. And you can't say, well, yeah, I'm doing 3/4, right, of the mitzvah. No. When you have 3 corners, you're doing 0 of the mitzvah. You got 0 there. So that's the formula, right? According to this, right? What's the formula? 3/4 equals 0. Mathematical equation. Okay, so that's that. And then it says, since you don't have 4, all the while that you don't have 4 tzitzit, it's not considered to be according to halacha. So therefore, it says if it goes into the public domain, right, b'Shabbat on Shabbat, chayav chatat is going to be liable, right, for carrying. You hear that, Yitzchak?
Yeah, Rabbi, I got you.
Liable for carrying the tzitzit. Because it's not, there's no mitzvah there, so therefore it's not considered to be clothing. It's just some kind of a remnant there, some kind of hangover.
Right. It's not. It's no longer valid. It's it. So it's
right. So just like it's hanging off there. You know. So it says if he has all 4, mutar tzitba, then he can go out with it to the public domain. Even nowadays, because we don't have tchelet. Nevertheless, even though we don't have tchelet, the white is a mitzvah. That's the chidush, right? The white is also mitzvah. Okay, very good. That's the tour. So let's go to Bet Yosef. Pretty straightforward. Bet Yosef. Okay, so it says Bet Yosef like this. Arba tzitziot me'akrin zeh. So then he starts right after the headline from the tour. It says Besop perek kakometz. Right at the end of this perek, which is also right there, same Gemara. Rabba kometz Rabba. Tanan, we learn over there in the Mishnah. Arba tzitziot me'akvot zeh zeh. 4 tzitziot, they do hold back one the other. She'arbatan mitzvah echad. Why? Because all 4 of them are one mitzvah. Rabbi Yishmael Omer, it says Rabbi Yishmael, arbatan arba mitzvot. So he says no. Each one is 4. Each one is 1 mitzvah. So altogether you have 4 mitzvot there, according to Rabbi Yishmael. With Gemara, so it says in the Gemara. Lama Zayin Amud Bet, right over there, and also Menachot. My Benayahu. So what's the practical difference between these 2 opinions? Amar Avina de Rav Huna Ika Benayahu. So it says the opinion of Rav Huna was practical difference. What does that mean? The Amar Rav Huna, because Rav Huna said, "Hayotze betalit she'ena mitzuyet," said Kilchata. If you go out with a talit on Shabbat, which is not properly mitzuyet, it doesn't have proper tzitzit, like the halacha. Shabbat chayav chatat. He's going to be liable on that, right? To bring a sin offering. Why is that? Because he's breaking Shabbat. He's right. So why is that? Because he's carrying those strings around, and there's no mitzvah there. So basically, just no purpose with that. Peresh Rashi explains. So everybody holds like Rav Huna. Miu says, however, he til shalosh velo adervit. Let's say he put 3 corners tzitzit, and the 4th one he did not put. The Tanakam, according to the first opinion, havia metzuyetzet. It's considered to be finally like it has tzitzit. Shelo kilchata. I'm sorry, it's not, but not according to halacha. Not according to halacha. And therefore, he's liable to bring. He's liable for breaking Shabbat. The havu lehu tzitzit masui. Why is that? What's the reason why he's liable? Because tzitzit becomes over here a burden. What does that mean? It's like you're carrying something, because there's no purpose for that in this particular clothing, right? If it was doing the mitzvah, the purpose would be to fulfill the mitzvah, but for the clothing. But since you're not doing the mitzvah properly, all you're doing is just carrying around a bunch of strings, which have really nothing to do with the beged. They have nothing to do with clothing. This is the problem. That's according to the first opinion, right? According to Rabbi Yishmael, it's considered to be that it has tzitzit. Why? Because you have 3 mitzvot there. Each corner is a separate mitzvah. The eno pasul. So therefore, it says it's not pasul. Rav Huna be'asuya be'pisul. So it says, and Rav Huna is referring to when it was made with pisul. It was made pasul. So the Gemara concludes over there, right after all this whole discussion. What's the halacha? We don't pass like Rabbi Yishmael. So what does that mean? We say, right, that all 4 tzitzit is 1 mitzvah. That's the halacha. So therefore, if you're missing 1, you are breaking Shabbat, right? You're desecrating Shabbat. By the way, I want to tell you, Yitzchak, that what we learned in the last siman in the before, right? That answers your question, by the way. So you don't need to really unravel the tzitzit if you're in a case like that. That's what Maran said. Because even though you have no strings left whatsoever, you're relying on the knots.
So that was the previous halacha that we just
so
learned.
Therefore, you don't really need to unravel it. You can just leave it as it is until you can buy a new one.
So it's still kosher.
Right.
Well, right, to the lenient opinion.
Right. So I just wanted to point that out, so you get it. Okay, so then we'll go on over here. Ukatav Rosh, the Chuvot Klal Sheni. So says the Rosh over there in a Chuvah response, Shara'a Lektzat Rabotav. He says, I saw some of my rabbis, Shayu Poshtim Talit Shelahem, they were taking off their talit, Keshayu Yotzim Reshut Harabim, they were going to the public domain. Wow. The Shehu Sover, Shechumra She'ena Tam. So he held, the Rosh, there's no reason to be machmir like this, to be stringent. Well, so what does that mean? The tzitzit is kosher, so why are you afraid to carry it in the public domain? There's no reason for that. Right? So it says, what are you concerned about over here, says the Rosh? If you're going to be concerned that maybe the strings were cut off, it doesn't not enough to be kosher tzitzit. So then how did you bless on it when you put it on? If you're going to tell me you're going to tell me they checked all the 4 tzitziot when you put it on, so you should also check when it goes out to the street to check it again. And this way he won't have to take it off. So in other words, he still doesn't understand why these rabbis, remove their tzitzit when they go to the public domain. There's no reason for that.
Yeah, that's very strange.
In other words, they take the talit off,
Right, but why take it off if you're
because they're afraid that something's going to happen there, right? So they're going to do some sin. So he's saying if you're afraid, because what? Because you're going that you may think you think that it may get cut off. So then check it before you go out. What's the problem? Make sure that it's not cut off. That's what he says. Okay, so then he goes on to say. So he says people don't check their tzitzit every hour, every minute. The people don't do that. Also, when they're putting on their talit, they don't do it. As you see, right? Most people don't check their tzitzit before they put on their talit. Why is that? I'm sorry?
Rabbi, I thought we were supposed to. Right before. I thought we were supposed to, before we put the talit gadol on, we should check all the 4.
The truth is, it's only a chumrah, this whole thing. So why is that, by the way? Because it has chazakah that's kosher. You know what that means, chazakah?
From the previous time?
Exactly. It's a presumptive state, that was already, checked before. So why would you think that something changed?
I mean,
there's no reason.
Is that to prevent the sin? Sorry, Rabbi. I'm sorry. What were you saying? I was just asking, is it to prevent a potential sin of saying the bracha in vain?
Yeah, of course. That's the whole point, right?
Right. So if we don't check and if it was ripped, we just say the bracha, and then we realize, and the next time we don't do it, but that one we kind of screwed up.
Right. Yeah. I understand you, but what he's saying is right that we don't have to worry about that because it's a chazakah.
I see.
So we rely on that. Chazakah is a very strong concept in halakha. Presumptive state.
Got it. Okay.
It works, by the way, in many fields of halakha, this whole thing, right? Chazakah. So how long does the chazakah go? Until you found that it's not kosher. Then the chazakah is over, right? By the way, the same thing also applies to a mikveh, right? Let's say a mikveh, right? The last time I checked it, it was kosher. So it has chazakah now until you find that something is wrong. Same thing with the mikveh, So we rely on chazakah in many, many things, in many areas of halakha. Okay, very good, Baruch Hashem. So it says, right, that the ציציות אינו נפסל בכל העולם רגילים לתקנם אף לקודם שיגיע לידי פיסול לכך. So it says tzitzit are not easily, messed up. In other words, they're pretty rugged. So therefore, there's no reason really to go crazy. So people, he says also, people check them before, before they come to get puzzled. In other words, they're on top of it. They fix it beforehand. They fix it before it gets puzzled. So it says, therefore, it says, Mukmina lehu cheskate. So therefore, so what we do is we leave it on the chazaka. That's kosher. Cheskatayu. When it comes to bracha, so it says the same thing when it comes to Shabbat, right? If you want to go out in the public domain, we assume that the chazaka is the same. It stayed the way it was. Right? That's the whole point. So it says also when you go into the public domain, whoever is not ragil, right, accustomed to go 4 amot, which is about 6 feet, below tzitzit, without tzitzit, rawi lo lismoch ala chazaka, you should rely on the chazaka that we mentioned. Let's go out with it. So if he wants to be machmir, it says if they can b'shat yetziat, should check them at the time of going out. So it says some say all our talitot havian mitzviyatzot shelo kilchatan. Anyway, they're not done properly. So you can't go on the public with them. So it says really this makes no sense. It says to say something like that. So meaning what?
Rabbi,
like
I'm sorry.
they're trying to say, right? Maybe they're trying to say that since we don't have tchelet, they're not properly done.
But it's still, didn't we say it's a separate mitzvah? The
Right,
and,
but there's
and
different opinions about that, So there are some who say, that it's not really the way we do it today is not according to halacha. That's one way to explain it, right? This whole thing. That's the why they didn't want to go out with that. But Rosh says it's not correct. This svara. So if they're not done like according to halacha, how do we bless on them, right? What kind of thing is that? So it says that really the Torah said the corner needs 2 strings, lavan, white, and 2 strings tchelet. So he said there's an oral tradition from Sinai that the tchelet is not holding back the lavan, the white. So therefore the truth is, it will be enough to have just 2 strings, lavan, just white. But it says what we do is we put 2 more. Right? Zecher tchelet is we want to remember the amount with the tchelet. So it says also, according to their words, that they're not, according to what they're saying, these people, that they're not properly done. It's still not to go out in the public domain. Why? Like we said over there in Gemara, Shabbat, מתעטף אדם בקהילה ובקסקסיה ויוצא ברשות הרבים. So it says over there that a person is allowed to put this kind of clothing, whatever it is, we'll see what that is, and go into the public domain. What's the difference between this and Rav Huna? That he said, right, if you go with the talit, which is not the proper tzitzit, the proper Shabbat, you should tell him to the public domain. Chayav Hatat, he's going to be liable to bring a sin offering. Tzitziot the gabe talit chashive. So he says the tzitziot regarding the talit are considered to be important, so therefore they're not nullified. They're not nullified. Hane lo chashive, but he says these things are not really important. They're not really significant. So therefore, there's a batle. They get nullified, right, as corresponding to the to the clothing. So that's why the halacha is different with these 2 things. So explains the rach. The tzitzit chashiva. So he said tzitzit is chashuv. It's important. Tzitzit. Velo batla. So therefore, doesn't get nullified.
Sorry, I couldn't get that. What does it mean? Like it doesn't get nullified in the other case.
You know what that means? When it gets nullified, that means that you're not carrying anything because it's a part of the beged.
Oh, I see.
It's nullified in the beged.
Got it.
Right. You know what nullified means, right? It's as if it's like not there.
Right.
Okay, so Sha'at tzitziot mutzarfam lezor says B'trav ki dato letaken sha'at tzitziot mutzarfam lezor, because his intention is to fix the other tzitziot and to combine with them this sheikh which is kosher. Yilkach Lo batla. So it's therefore it doesn't get nullified. Hane kaskasim batle, but it says these kaskasim, right? These scales, whatever they are, right? Batle gabu kila. They are battle regarding the kila, right? Some kind of clothing, whatever it is. V'chen nami talitot shelanu. Says also, it says ar talitot sheyesh lahem arba tzitziot. They have 4 tzitzit. Afilu chashabt lehu enam mitzuyatzot kilchatan. Even if you think that they're not properly done today, but they're still, nevertheless, they're going to be nullified. The gabe talit, regarding the talit. Wow, that's very interesting. So Rabbeinu also wrote this in Shin Aleph Tur. בסוף דבריו כתב, in the end he writes, והר"ם, says the Ram, היה מחמיר שלא לצאת can you imagine? He was מחמיר not to go out with that in the street. ואדוני אבי הראש ז"ל היה יוצא בה. It says the Rosh was not מחמיר. Interesting. Okay, interesting. Wow. בתשובות הרמב"ן, so it says, בתשובה הרמב"ן, response to the Ramban, סימן רש תת, right? The siman katuv, it's written over there. V'zeh lashano, this language of Ramban, mutar lelech b'talit katan b'shut harabim. You're allowed to go with talit katan in the public domain b'Shabbat on Shabbat. Kudeita b'perek hakometz rabbah, like it's over there written in this Gemara, which is in Menachot again. Hayotze b'talit b'shena mitzvuyat. It goes like this: if you go out with talit, which doesn't tzitzit properly, b'chata b'Shabbat on Shabbat, chayav chatat. You're liable on chatat to bring a sin offering. Finish Rashi. Rashi explains, talking about their talitot. Oh, why is that? So he says, you know why? Because they were colored with the tchilet of the tzitzit. Chashiva, they're important, they're significant. So therefore, they're not. They don't get nullified. So therefore, he's liable on chatat to bring a sin offering. When it's not done properly. It's considered like a burden. But it says regarding us, so they're not chashuv. So therefore, they get nullified. Wow. Yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit? Like, what do they? What's the problem with their talit?
He says tchilat is more chashuv, is more important than white. So therefore, tchilat doesn't get bottled. You know what I mean? But white gets bottled.
Which specific case are we talking about here? Like, if it went bad and the person is carrying it.
1 second. We're talking about he's going out with tzitzit, which is no good.
Right. And if his tchelet is not good,
so then it doesn't get nullified because tchelet is chashuv. It's significant. But when it comes to white, it's not significant. So therefore, it gets nullified. That's what he's saying.
I see. Thank you, Rabbi.
Interesting. Good. Okay, so So no, it says okay. So then he says Omnam Rach Piresh. But he says the Rach explained, even with our talitot, hatzitziot chashiva, they're still important, even though they're white. Shem asuim l'shem mitzvah. Why? Because they're made for mitzvah. So therefore they're not nullified. That's what he says, the Rach. So it seems to be a machloket between the Rach and the Rashi. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that's what it is. Okay. So that's interesting. לגבי טלית, אכן לשני הפירושים מותר ללך בטלית קטן כשהציציות מתוקנת כהלכתה. But he says, either way, right, it says the Rosh, either way you go, according to Rach or the Rashi, if it's done properly, there's no problem, right? Everybody agrees. Nobody's talking about that. Maharam haya machmir. So he says, Maharam was machmir. Atzmo, on himself, מללך בטלית קטן, to go on with קטן ברשות הרבים, שבת. ברשות הרבים on Shabbat. דילמה, נפסק חד מהציציות. Why? Maybe one of the tzitziot got cut off. V'chen amad dabar. So he says that's how people do. So what does that mean?
That's so common?
I'm sorry?
It's so common for the tzitzit to be cut off that he wouldn't go out in the public domain.
He was a Hasid, you know, he was a big Hasidus guy. You know what I mean? That's what comes out. Because according to Halakha, we're not concerned about things like this. Hasidut. Okay, so right, כתוב בנימוק יוסף, it says בנימוק יוסף, בסוף הלכות ציצית, לא זו ציצית, בשם הריטווה, in the name of the ריטווה, וזה לשונו, this language, ויש חוששים לצאת בזמן הזה, he also says this, right? There are some that are concerned to go out in our times, בשבת בטלית זה, I'm sorry, yeah, בטלית זה שאין בו עיטוף גמור. With this kind of talit, with a talit katan. Why? Because we don't really wrap ourselves in that. That's one thing, right? We're just wearing it like a t-shirt. So it says it's really under like the jacket, right? The outer jacket, the outer cloak, whatever. Right? So it looks like you're just carrying it. Kaful, and like seems like it's like a it's like redundant clothing, you know, like no purpose. So he says there's no concern the malbush gamuh because it's really like a totally clothing, this whole thing. Chashuv tov hu lasot memtzaito achizot ke'en sarbal וכן שמעתי שהיו נוגעים באשכנז וצרפת וכן הייתי רבים שהיו חוששים בדבר הזה בשם הרב החסיד וכן ישנו. So he says I saw some people that are machmir about this. They don't go out with that in Shabbat. So it seems like there was a custom like this, you know, amongst some Hasidim, you know, not to go out like this.
I see.
So it says, right, I don't know what the concern is over here. Cloud, at all, it says. Says we saw over there, right, in Perek Tolin, it says you're allowed to wrap yourself in these things and go to the public domain, some clothing, whatever it is. Well, Perek Chavit, right? But in Perek Chavit, Shabbat, ha'olyarin mevi'in belurei nashim, belurei nashim, bnei bene, ובלבד שיתכסה בה ראשו ורובו. וכן שכן בהנה טליתות שהן מרובשים ממש, ששרה ואין טעם להצריך לעשות לאחיזות. So he says, really the truth is, you know, that it's all the more so, right? If you're learning from this Gemara, it used to go out with even this kind of clothing, which is not really, you know, like 100% clothing. All the more so when it comes to Talit Katan, there's no problem with that. So there's no reason, you know, to make all kinds of extra things on the beged in order to make it into clothing. So what is he talking about? He's talking about giving it like sleeves, you know, making sleeves.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't need to make sleeves. That's what he's trying to say, right?
Anything that's on you, you can.
Right. It's like it's on your body, you know. It's hanging, you know. That's called clothing.
Right.
You don't need to have sleeves. Well, Mordechai is so Perek Chavit. So it says in Mordechai, and there's this Perek Katuv Gamken. It's written over there also. שמותר לצאת בטלית קטן. You're allowed to go with טלית קטן. רק שיהיו מתוקן בציציותיו. As long as the tzitzit is good, right? Everything is good there. Because you know, like proper way, it's proper done in proper way. The Ram again, right? He says the Ram was machmir. We already saw this before. Because he was afraid the Ram that maybe the strings got broken. Therefore, it's pasul. Kolbo, right? It says in the Kolbo, Katuv sherabotav zal lo chashu leRam. Nobody's really concerned. He says about the Ram. Nobody does like that. So he says the minhag is the people go out in the public domain. Dat Rosh, take the Rosh. Also the Rashba holds like that. Katav Tshuva, he wrote in Tshuva, Sharif, the Rif, Pasak Keman Diamar and Tchelet Me'aked. He passed like the opinion that says that Tchelet doesn't hold back the Laman, the white. When the says his words are reasonable, probable. So he says, therefore we do like him. Ben bechol ben b'Shabbat, whether it's yom, it's a weekday or Shabbat. Ad kan Hashem, that's what it says. V'chen dat Rambam. That's also the Rambam. Katuv Pek Yom Tet Minchot Shabbat. That's what it says also over there. Halacha Chaf. Talit HaMetzuyetzet Kilchata. So it says the Rambam like this. If the talit has tzitzit like properly, according to halacha, mutar letzet ba ben beyom ben belayla. Whether it's day or night, shena tzitzit hagemura masui. So it says as long as the tzitzit is done properly, it's not called a burden; it's called clothing. Manuya beged, minoya beged. It says it's just like considered to be a part of the beauty of the clothing. And like it's like embroidering, embroiderment, whatever. Like the edge, it says, or whatever. The things like this, that kind of show. So says Maran in the end, right? Bottom line, since all these rabbis maskimim that matir, all of them are agreeing to be matir, right? To go around with the talit katan or whatever, only talit on Shabbat. That's how Paskin says. That's what Minhagi says, right? Minhagi is to be mikkel, to be lenient about this. So therefore, there's no concern, to go out with Shabbat on Shabbat with the talit katan, talit gadol. It's all good, right? Whatever.
Interesting, Rabbi. Why would that be considered an issue? I mean, we wear jackets, right?
Yeah.
And any other type of clothing. Why specifically tzitzit katan? That's as Sephardic, we would put the strings inside.
You know why? Because it's placed on your body. It's not wrapped on you. Number one, like a talit, and also it's not. There's no sleeves, so you're not wearing it in the absolute way. That's why they're concerned about it.
Yeah, I mean it's like a T-shirt that's under. I mean they didn't wear it like this.
But also the reason of the Ram, right? The Ram says because it may break. It may break. Right. That's also different reason. Okay, whatever. Let's see Shulchan Aruch and we're done. So says the Shulchan Aruch, if the tzitzit is done properly on the beged, on the talit, mutar etzet ba reshut harabim. You're allowed to go in the public domain. Ben talit katan, ben talit gadol. Whether it's big or small, no difference. Afilu bizman hazeh, even in our times, it says she'en lanu tchelet. Even though we don't have tchelet, it doesn't make any difference. It's still called tzitzit. There's still mitzvah there. But look what the Ramah says, right? Somebody put this in here. It says, but don't put it on your shoulders, like some people do. They put the talit on their shoulders only. You got to put it on your body. So meaning what? Don't wear it like a scarf, You know what I'm saying?
Right. But a scarf wouldn't be a problem though, right, Rabbi?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean you're right. It should be no problem. But it's if I remember correctly, but but anyway, right? That's a different issue, but right, but this you shouldn't put like a scarf because you're not wearing it properly.
Mm-hmm. I thought anything like
the scarf, which is meant to be worn like that. That's something else.
Right. I see.
I think that's the difference.
So it's not carrying anymore, right?
Yeah,
if it's worn improperly, that's exactly. Kind of like carrying it.
Yes. So it says, even though now we don't have okay, so then he goes on to say, in the parentheses, so he brings over here this whole thing, right? That we assume that the talit is kosher even without checking it, because it has chazakah, as we said, right?
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, you don't really have to check it, when you put it on, or when you go outside, as we mentioned, right? Okay, very good. So basically, right, that's the end of that. Okay, so we have one more left, but we'll do that B'ezras Hashem tomorrow. Okay, very good. Chazak Baruch. Thanks for being with us. Hope you feel better. Refuah Shlema.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you so much.
Tomorrow, B'ezras Hashem. God willing. Have a good night, ladies. God bless you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.
All the best. Laila Tov. Chazak Baruch.
Thank you, Rabbi. Laila Tov. Thank you, Rabbi.